Michael Drejka reasonably believe that he was about to die? No. Did he reasonably believe that he was about to be beaten to a pulp? Okay? And when you watch that video, watch it carefully. Okay? And I'm sure, the defense might say the same thing. Okay? And pay attention to this, which I'm sure you already have. When the defendant's on the ground, you could see both Robert Castelli and Michael McLaughlin start to move before the gun comes out. They both simultaneously recognize that he's pulling a firearm. And before that gun is even out, Michael McLaughlin is retreating. Watch the video, you'll see it. And when the gun's out, he's in full retreat, and he can't go back any farther because that car's there, and that's when he takes his turn to go to the store. That's exactly what you see on the video. Michael McLaughlin is reacting perfectly to what happened. Now, can you argue that the defendant could have pulled out that firearm? Absolutely. We could even say that he was justified in pulling the gun. But that was it. There was no reason for him to shoot and kill Michael McLaughlin. It was over when that gun came out. So arguably, was he right in pulling the gun out? Sure, but could he have killed him? No, because he wasn't about to die. He's holding a firearm. He's holding the weapon that ends the whole thing. How could he reasonably believe he was about to die? He didn't. That's why it's not justifiable use of deadly force. Now here's the other part of that instruction. In deciding whether he was justified, you must consider the circumstances by which he was surrounded at the time. But here's really the most important part of that instruction. The appearance of danger must have been so real, here's the term again, reasonably, that a reasonably cautious and prudent person under the same circumstances would have believed the danger could be avoided only through killing him. That's what it says. That's the instruction. And this is an important thing. It's not what the defendant thought. It's not, well, I thought this was going on, therefore I killed him. Okay? And this is important. It's what would a reasonably cautious and prudent person in his situation. It's not him. Okay? That's very important. It's not what he thought. It's what a reasonable person in his situation would have thought. That's an objective standard. A reasonable person in his position. So would a reasonable person think that while I have a firearm out and Michael McLaughlin's going backwards, that they were in danger of dying themselves? No. That's probably the most important part of this jury instruction. It's not what he thought, it's what a reasonable person thought in those circumstances. And when you watch that video, it is clear as day that even before that firearm came out, Michael McLaughlin was retreating. You can clearly see this is not justifiable use of deadly force. You cannot kill a retreating, unarmed man. That's not reasonable. No reasonable person would ever think that. That's why this doesn't apply. And that's why he's guilty of manslaughter. Let's talk about the facts of the case. Now, I'm also going to show you some clips. Okay? Now, you have all this evidence back there. I'm going to show you maybe 14 minutes of clips from the defendant's interview. First, let's go through the facts. So we know that Brittany Jacobs goes to the Circle A store. We know that when Brittany Jacobs goes to the store, she goes into the handicap parking spot. When she gets to the handicap parking spot, she's there. Should she park there? No. Side note, doesn't really mean anything. It's not a legally marked handicap spot. Again, that's just a side note. The defendant still thought that he could go and enforce it, but side note. So she gets to the parking spot, and what happens next? Well, the defendant pulls in, and he makes a beeline for her vehicle. And what we see is Marquise McLaughlin, and if at any time I said Michael, I apologize because I meant Marquise. Marquise McLaughlin gets out of the vehicle. And you can see he's walking up to the store with his 5-year-old son. And there's nothing unusual about that. Now let's just very briefly touch on Buffington's testimony. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. If you thought that that went on for a long time, it probably did feel like it did. It was important. Because one of the instructions Judge Malone reads you was a witness honest and straightforward in answering the questions. There is no way to think that Dr. Buffington was honest and straightforward in answering any question. So when you look at his testimony and you compare it to Dr. Goldberger's, I submit to you, Dr. Goldberger, that's the reasonable explanation. Okay? Because we had a talk about ecstasy, MDMA, all the literature, even the literature that Buffington talked about, tells you it's an empathetic drug, it's happiness, gives you an enhanced mood, it's not an aggressive drug, that's why people use it in club scenes. Okay? You heard all of that, I'm not going to go back over that with you. But probably one of the most important things that Dr. Goldberger says, we have to look at all this in context, and we can because we have a video that tells you everything that Marquise did that day was reasonable, not consistent with some adverse reaction to MDMA. I mean, when Buffington tells you that he should have brought his 5-year-old with him to the altercation, I submit to you that's unbelievable that that's what an expert's opinion would be. To drag the 5-year-old out into this scene that was out there. Or that once he's shot and he's basically dying in the parking lot, he should somehow go back towards the shit. Unbelievable, his opinion. I submit it has no credibility. So we know that Marquise is walking up to the Circle A with his 5-year-old, and as he gets there, he goes into the store. Now what he doesn't know is that this defendant pulls up in his truck, and for the next minute and 43 seconds, we know that there's a really loud confrontation that's happening outside. Because everybody that's out in the parking lot looks over. Now, when you watch the defendant's interview, he makes it sound like he walked up, hey, how you doing? Would you mind moving your car? Well, that's not anyone's testimony, but you don't even have to rely on anyone's testimony, because when you watch the video, you can see people, look, whoa, what's going on over there? So when he portrays it as, an act of kindness, not even remotely close.
Those are facts, not in evidence.
When he portrays it as an act of kindness, it's not even remotely close. He went there with the intent to confront Brittany Jacobs. So Robert Castelli, you hear from him, he goes into the store and tells the cashier there's an altercation outside. Okay? Whatever the language is that was used doesn't truly matter, because Marquise reacts properly. Now, I submit to you, this is very reasonable. I submit that many people, hearing that the family member of theirs is outside, wife, girlfriend, knowing 2 kids in the car, they would probably drop everything and run out of that store as fast as they can. Marquise was reasonable. He put his stuff down on the counter, started walking out. Let's go see what's going on. Turns the corner. You can see it's all on video. He's just walking down the sidewalk. He doesn't really do anything until he sees Brittany get out of the car. And when Brittany gets out of the car, now Brittany and this defendant are basically face to face, knowing there's an altercation. What does he do? Does he do this? Does he throw a wild haymaker, punch him in the temple, and knock him unconscious? No. Does he roundhouse kick him in the face and knock him unconscious, jump on him, begin beating him to a pulp? No. He shoves him. Think of all the things he could have done. He shoved him. He was protecting his girlfriend of 10 years. That's all he did. Was it a hard shove? We could play, as attorneys, we play synonym games all day long. Shove, violent shove, push, whatever it is, it's on video. You could describe it any way you want. We're not here to tell you that he lightly tapped him. He shoved them to create distance. I submit to you, that's certainly not unreasonable. Okay? Let's take the alternate position that it was unreasonable. Let's say that he shouldn't have pushed him. You still, no matter what, can't shoot a retreating, unarmed man. Does not matter if you believe in the shove, you don't believe in the shove. It does not matter. You can't shoot an unarmed retreating man regardless. I submit he was fine in shoving him. He was protecting his family. But even if you feel he wasn't, you think, you know what, he shouldn't have done that, fine. He still couldn't kill him. And that's important. So he comes down, he shoves him to the ground. Watch the video because, again, before that firearm even comes out, everyone is moving. Now, if he was really under the influence and having an adverse effect at MDMA, he wouldn't have reacted just like Castelli because Castelli wasn't taking MDMA. You can see it for yourself. That's what happened in this case. That's it. Marquise is protecting his family. Again, it doesn't matter if you feel it was a good shove or a bad shove. That's not an issue in the case. It's not. It doesn't matter that Brittany parked in that spot. She shouldn't have, but that's not an issue in the case. Really, what this is about is his behaviors. That's it. You know how this really started? It's not Brittany parking in that spot. It's because he's got a pet peeve, and he wants to be the armed enforcer at the Circle A. It's his problem. That's why we're here. Not because she parked there. It's because he takes it upon himself to be the enforcer at the Circle A. You heard from everybody. You don't put yourself in a position like he did when you're armed. And think about his interview, and we're going to go through it in just a little bit. Why does he say he felt it was okay to go to that Circle A like that? I always take precautions. I carry a permit. I could enforce this parking lot situation if I want to because I have a permit. So when you put that sentence together, what's your common sense tell you? I carry the final solution on me. Hey, whatever happens, happens. I know I got the final solution. I feel comfortable going up to anybody because I'm carrying the final solution. There's no other way to look at that. No other way to look at that statement. When you watch this, when you watch the clips, but when you watch the whole thing, I'm sure you already did this, but watch everything he says, how he says it, what his body language is telling you when he says it. Think about the terminology he used, okay? We're talking about law enforcement, and then we talk about civilians. Well, remember, the law's the same. Justifiable use of deadly force is the same. Okay? But think of the terms he's using. I submit to you he's a parking lot vigilante. He uses this terminology in his interview. Neutralize. How many civilians walk around saying the word neutralize? Negative. How many civilians walk around saying negative? Did you make dinner tonight? Negative. Want to go to the movies tonight? Negative. Those are law enforcement and military and militant and vigilante terms. No one talks like that. Neutralize, negative. Nobody does that. But that's the terminology he uses. And watch how he says these things. Like, I can't believe that Brittany Jacobs confronted me. That's his mentality. He goes to enforce a spot at a convenience store, not even like it's his own property. And then he's like, oh, I can't believe she talked back to me like that. How could a woman who's alone in the car with her 2 kids talk to me when I'm confronting her about a parking spot? That's his mentality. So watch his demeanor in that interview. It tells you everything about where he's coming from. This isn't remotely close to a justified shooting.